Okay, tell me truthfully, when it comes to the word happiness, how do you feel? Okay, I'll tell you how I feel. I feel overwhelmed. Sometimes I felt like I constantly had to fake it because I was in the well-being industry and I felt a lot of pressure from other people. So whenever I used to go into conversations, especially in the spiritual community, I was really over it because I felt like we're constantly bypassing the very things we should look at to get us to feel happy within ourselves. Also, for me, happiness means also understanding sadness. They both go hand in hand, or happiness goes with anger. There's one thing goes with the other thing because otherwise I wouldn't understand happiness. So when it comes to this conversation, I roll my eyes and I think, okay, here we go again. Whenever I meet somebody who talks to me about being happy. So being here in Dubai, I decided I was going to explore this wellness. And I came across an interesting event on well-being and AI, and I wanted to know more. I showed up at this event, and lo and behold, the keynote is on, yes, happiness. The speaker was Dr. Louise Lambert, who is the guest of this week's show. Now, what I really liked about her was her just down-to-earth practical approach on how happiness actually could look like. But there was this one thing she shared with me, and I really appreciated, which was on our reflections on what is the quality of our lives. I'm so excited to share this week's episode with you. Enjoy. And it's always because I'm like, I am not every day, every moment happy.
Okay, so you're normal. Yeah.
And so then, exactly.
Okay.
So then when I read your title, when I met you and I came for a presentation and you had happiness written there, I was like, oh, here we're going to go. Positive psychology, that's going to annoy me. But you just turned it on its head and I was like, oh, respect. I want to hear more. And the reason why is I want to understand, to start with, how we can drop our noise about what happiness is.
Yeah.
And become friends. And become friends with what it could be.
Okay. I love this. Well, I'd also love to figure that equation out because admittedly, happiness is like the worst word ever. And it started out with very noble intentions in positive psychology. And unfortunately, it is the word that has been, I'm going to say it, hijacked. And now it smacks of happy faces and pizza pop parades and all sorts of like silly gimmicks and whatnot. And yet it's very scientific and it's taken very seriously in psychology and economics, in healthcare and education. And it's just when it comes into the common conversation that it kind of breaks down a little bit. And yet it deserves a lot of respect.
Why does it? Okay, let's start there. Yeah. Why does it deserve a lot of respect?
Because it is the single determining factor of how you will do in life. So there is so much research done around the world, and this is not just Western stuff, but done even here in the region, showing that, when people are happier, they learn better, they're more productive, their performance is higher, they are also healthier, they have stronger immune systems, they make more money, they get promoted more often. They're also easier to govern when we think about, citizens and society. There are so many advantages in life to being happier versus unhappy, pessimistic, cynical, doubtful, mistrusting. This doesn't really bring the advantages, but happiness does. And so for that reason, we should all be taking it a lot more seriously.
And what is it not? Before I say something.
Yeah, and that's a good question. What is it not? It's not feeling happy every day, because that would actually mean you're manic, like to me, that's a mental health issue. If you're like super happy every single day, because then I kind of question, like, are you still like paying attention to reality? You don't have to be happy every single waking moment of the day. That's actually not really normal. What we're looking for is a chronic state of happiness where when it's time, be happy. And when it's not time, be unhappy, because there's things to learn from unhappiness as well. And unhappiness can also be a really good signal and clue in life that we need to do things differently. So it's not a state you need to be in every single day. So that's frequency. We can also think about it in terms of intensity. So different cultures, but also different personalities. Different individuals will have different preferences around how it is meant to feel. So if you think about it in terms of North American happiness, it's like, bah, right? It's like in your face. And then other cultures, like, this is very happy in life. And yeah.
Do you think happiness is like a spectrum? So
yeah, absolutely. And there's different definitions of it. So some people focus more on high intensity positive emotions. For other people, it's more a state of contentment, being satisfied with life, focusing more on quality of life versus experiences. So there's different ways to think about it. And that is why it is possible that some people score very high in positive emotional experiences, but maybe lower on meaning. Other people score very high in meaning and don't have very many positive emotional experiences. So the research would suggest, both are good for us. We need a balance of both, but that balance is determined by you, your comfort level, but it also has a lot to do with social norms as well. So people who, are a little bit more higher on meaning might struggle in societies where we express it more often. And the flip side is also true. I think you've noticed I'm more of like, and yeah, it kind of freaks people out sometimes. And then there are other moments where happiness is, just kind of a deeper, meaningful thought or a way of existing. And that's okay too. So there is a huge spectrum. There's huge diversity in what makes for a happy life. Individuals can define that as they like. But it needs to be defined and it needs to be talked about and made salient, because life is short and also it's worth living to the fullest, however it is that you define that.
Okay. So now I'm going to get into this couple of things.
Okay.
Among, if I'd say, are you happy? And it'd be like, well, the opposite of happy, there's duality. So there's also sadness. So you can't have happiness without the sadness. So you cannot say sadness is the worst thing. Then you look around society, and I agree with you. Everywhere is like happy on every box you can think of. It's being marketed to the point that you think, okay, this is OTT.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like we are avoiding the underlining stuff that makes us see happiness. So that also the gritty stuff, the things that don't look positive. We need that just as much as in order to also appreciate this side. Or have I got this reversed?
No, I think you're quite right. So a couple of things are happening. One, the field of happiness. Now I say field because there is a field of inquiry around it. So there's the research and the science and, there's that side of it. And then there's the commercialization of happiness. And this is all the happy faces and what have you. And I think sometimes when we don't understand the science, we are inclined to follow the commercialization of it and think, oh, that's happiness. A new pair of shoes, a new car, a new this, a new that. And it's not that it's not, but this is where we now start talking about philosophy. So if we think about happiness, there's different, again, what I alluded to earlier. So there's the positive emotional experiences, and this is what we call hedonic happiness. So hedonia. So if we think about the ancient philosophers, they talked about hedonic happiness. And this is the type of happiness. It's very short-lived. It's instant. It's right here, right now. It's the type you get when you bite into a chocolate bar or you buy those great shoes. And it's not long lasting, but we do need these little pick-me-ups. Now, whether your pick-me-up costs 3 million dirhams or, $2, that's up to you. But these are kind of these momentary, fleeting moments. And then there's another type of happiness, and it's eudaimonic happiness. And this is the type of happiness, eudaimonic. Again, Aristotle talked a lot about this. And this is the type of happiness you just alluded to, the type that doesn't feel so good. People are like, wait, happiness that doesn't feel good? Yeah. When you're doing a university degree, I can ask you on any given day, how's that going? And you'll be like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Yeah. I have exams, I have assignments, I have this, I have that. But the growth you get from that, the satisfaction you get from that, and you are becoming a better version of you. That is a form of happiness. So that's eudaimonic happiness.
Okay.
And that comes from striving and working hard and failing and taking risks. And we don't talk about that type of happiness that often, or at least we don't use the word. We don't call it happiness, but it is a form of striving. And why do we not talk about it? Well, it's harder to sell, it's harder to package, and it feels kind of rotten. And people want the instant stuff. So part of it is, maybe we need to market it better, but there are different types of happiness, absolutely. And again, we need both. Both matter.
This leads into what you had me thinking, because you said it's not something that's marketed very well, right? But on the other hand, I think about technology today, and I think about generations today. So my version of happiness now, in the age that I'm in, and my version of happiness when I was into my 20s are very completely different.
Sure.
Right? So what are the principles or the values that you can share with somebody that says, look at this from the start? So if anybody who listens to this in their 20s or 30s or 40s, what would be certain things that they can find themselves knowing on both these sides, the hedonic and the eudaimonic?
And eudaimonic. And look, in psychology, particular in positive psychology, because that's what we do, we come up with different theoretical models and concepts and constructs and measures and whatnot. There's lots of models of what is good living. So we don't go as far as to tell people you need, a house, a partner, or this or that. That's up to you. But there are general principles, absolutely. One of them is relationships. So if we look at the biggest single factor that is going to contribute to your life, and it's good relationships. So whether you're 8 years old or you're 92, having people around you, and these include close ties. So it could be, intimate partners, but it can also be just good friends. It can be family, but people that you can trust and people that you can rely on. But it can also be weak ties, knowing the neighbor, people in your community, being able to walk out in the street and say, hello, and you don't know actually who they are, but it's normal to greet one another. We validate one another. So relationships is a huge one. And, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit how technology is affecting that.
I just had the image of getting into the elevator and these people looking at me like, I'll take the next elevator because you're in it. Like, what? I look all right.
Oh, no.
But then I realize it's that weak relationship that they don't have. Okay, so relationships.
Yeah,
let's go on.
so relationships, definitely. And I know it sounds kind of boring and everybody wants like some big magical answer, but just taking care of our health. I'm always stunned by people who are like, I'm struggling with sadness, depression, lack of meaning. And you just ask basic questions like, how much sleep are you getting? Are you getting exercise? Are you moving? Like, it sounds like trivial, but really it's a massive mood changer. Yeah. And when your body is kind of moving and being used the way it is meant to be, many things just fall into place. So not to discount the physical side. And then I think it also, just comes back to kind of this idea of striving and growing. And, some people like goals. I'm not goal driven. You could have it, you can think about it in terms of intentions, aspirations, however you want to word it. But something that makes your life worth getting up for in the morning. So whether that's starting a side hustle, or whether that's volunteering, or whether that's just being really good at what you do at work.
So is that like bringing meaning into your life?
Yeah, in some way. So whatever is meaningful for you. So again, I don't tell people what to do, but it's just thinking about what matters to you. And often we can tell what matters to somebody by where they spend their time.
Oh, that's so true. I hadn't thought about that. You are what you think.
You are what you do, and you are what you do.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't always line up. Sometimes people would like to do things and don't, for a wide range of reasons. But it's thinking about, if you find yourself every now and then thinking, oh, I wish I could do that. Or, oh, wouldn't that be cool? Or, oh, that'd be really, well, then that's what you need to do, right? Like if you're thinking about it, it's because the idea appeals to you somehow. There's meaning in that. There's something valuable in that. So, I kind of try and encourage people, like, you can't just have work and family, or work and relationships, or work in the gym. Like you need something for you as well. It's going to make your heart sing, or at least not cry. So meaning is important. And then we need fun. And fun is going to look different for different people. So fun might be, hey, I'm going to go, meet a bunch of friends on a Friday night, people I don't know and just got randomly invited to.
I think I had that on Friday.
Exactly. Or it could be, I want to start gardening on my balcony and start growing little tomatoes. It doesn't matter what it is, but something that just uplifts you. That's its sole role. Just to uplift you. That's it. So I consider positive emotions a little bit like vitamins. It's just a boost. That's all. It's not going to transform your life, but if you don't have it, life gets boring.
You make me think, because I'm like thinking about this. I'm like, there's so many strands about this. I was thinking about this one sentence. There were two sentences you said to me that really struck out. And I've come back every time I've met you, I've come back to this, but that we speak about well-being as ill-being. So when I'm thinking about all these layers you just described, I'm thinking about that kind of person who, whenever they have to think about the quality of relationships, the quality of being asked how you're doing, they go in, or if somebody asks, they almost go in like a coach already, looking for the problem in in a person's tapestry of what's wrong with you. That other person on the other side retreats almost into a sense of loneliness. Does that make sense?
So this is where positive psychology is very different from other branches. So if we think about mainstream psychology, it was designed for a very clear purpose: help people fix their problems. And that's good, because when you have a big problem, you want it fixed. It makes life miserable. And, if we think about mental health issues, they are generally about 1 in 5 people. In some places, it's lower. Here in the UAE, it's 14%, the prevalence rate. But there's a lot of what passes for mental health issues that is just not really knowing how to live our lives anymore. And so...
Wait. Repeat that again.
Yeah. So a lot of what passes as mental health issues are just not knowing how to live our lives. And I'll tell you why that is. So I worked in mental health for many years, and like really, schizophrenia, major clinical disorder, anxiety disorders, personality disorders. Poverty, violence, drug abuse, murder, like full on. And I'm not saying these are not real. They are absolutely real issues, and they absolutely need to be dealt with. But we keep calling them mental health issues. We keep putting labels on them. This is a mental health issue. And the problem with doing that is we focus on the individual and what's going on in their head, and we don't really step back out and go, so how did we get here? Like, how did we get to this point where, a lot of these problems have become so generalized that we diagnose them, stick them in a book, and go, okay, now that's an issue with a person, instead of, wow, this is not normal in society. How did we get here? These are social issues. These are problems in living. These are problems in the sense that, when people lose their job, of course they feel down, sad, and depressed. But do we call that clinical depression and now we're fixing depression, or is this an economic issue? No, it's probably a bit of both by then. But if we fix the economic issue, would it still be a mental health issue? Probably not. Now, does that mean we treat it differently? I don't know. But I think, when we are raised in these modern societies, and now we add AI and, lots of stress and fast paced, and people are stuck in traffic for 2 hours a day, and et cetera, we become unwell. But these aren't mental health issues. These are urban planning issues. These are economic issues. These are technology issues. These are workplace issues. And by making them individual issues, we have to make it harder for people, because now they carry around this big burden of, oh, I guess I'm the problem. No, you're not. It's not you. Stop it. These are things that we need to fix at a systemic level. And there's a lot of stigma and guilt that people carry when sometimes it's not yours to carry. And so thinking about where we place responsibility for things also makes a big difference. But I want to go even further than that. So coming back to, psychology. So we focused and have focused and continue to focus in psychology on mental health issues. And that's okay, because those do exist. But what it also means is that when we're focusing on problems, when we're focusing on issues, well, if you don't have a problem and if you don't have an issue, who takes care of you? Nobody. And so if you want to just like improve your life, and if you want to be more amazing, and if you want to raise your quality of life, and you want to be happier, well, where are you supposed to go? Because as a psychologist, the first thing they will say is, what's the problem? What is the presenting issue? What is the symptoms? Well, if you don't have any of these, sorry, there's no services for you. So positive psychology does something very different. You don't need a problem to see a positive psychologist. You just need a life. And positive psychology is really focused on how do we just raise you to the next level?
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean it's all fluffy. It doesn't mean it's fluffy at all, because we use, again, it is a psychology. We use science. We use different measures. We use different concepts. We use different theoretical models. We use different interventions, but these are tested in the same way. We use the same scientific method as other branches of psychology that they do. So in terms of the rigor and science, it's the same. The only difference is you don't need to qualify with a problem to see us. And our goal is not just to make you less miserable, less depressed, less anxious, but it is to help you get past that and beyond the neutral zone and into living your life well, so that you can be happy and you can have quality and it's satisfying, and you get up in the morning and you're like, let's make things happen. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to jump out of bed and be that magical unicorn. Again, you choose your brand of happiness and how you want to express that and live it. But it's helping you be able to develop those skills and abilities, psychosocial assets that we call them, to be able to make that happen.
But Louise, I can understand that. Then I have like friends or a younger generation to be like, I can only talk to my psychologist about this. I've been traumatized. And there's this heavy sense of blame goes on, and it's always associated with my therapist said language. So sometimes I'm almost sitting there and I'm like, so if the therapist tells you to jump, you're going to jump, or how does this work? And then my face says it all, and I'm like, okay, stop it.
Neutral face.
I'm trying to have a neutral face. And this is the part where that word happiness also gets this like bad reputation, because they're like, oh, this is my zone of happiness and you're not a part of it. And it's almost like a barrier. And then I see another generation that does it all behind here, which is where I'm like, oh, I can't be bothered to talk to the person. I'm just going to ghost them. And it's like certain languages or emojis. It almost feels passive aggressive, because they're like, you're not in my happiness space. And so you find yourself going, should I say something that feels truthful or uncomfortable? And you're tippy-toeing now, because the word happiness is now feeling like it comes out. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things happening, and I'm happy to share it with your listeners. So I found a study not too long ago looking at, are there really more mental health issues, or is there just a greater identification with mental health symptoms, which make people think they have more mental health issues? And it turns out both are a little bit true. So in short, what it's looking at is, what's the influence of, the TikTok, the Instagram, and all of this stuff. And in short, what they found is that no, prevalence of mental health issues are not going up.
Mm-hmm.
But we talk a lot about mental health issues. And that's good in a way. We have more awareness about them, and people go, okay, maybe that is me. But that's part of the problem too. Oh, maybe that is me. No, it's not. It's not you. And also, if we're not talking to other people, you think you're having a really bad day, which you may be,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean you're clinically depressed. That's normal. You're supposed to have bad days. That's how life goes. But if you're not bouncing that idea off others, you're not sharing your experiences with others, and you've never been exposed to different challenges in life where, struggling a little bit is normal. And then you get out the other side and you're like, whew, that was hard. But you know what? I learned things about myself. Yeah. It's almost like you're allergic to bad. You're allergic to negative emotions. You're allergic to things that are a little bit too difficult. And you're like, oh no, that's not my happiness. But A, that's not normal. B, you're stunting your own growth by doing that. But C, you walk around thinking you've got some personality disorder, some this, some that. No, you don't. So there's a lot of over-identification going on. And that's not necessarily good, because we've got people thinking there's things wrong with them when there's not. Which can sound dismissive to those who actually do have things going on with them. So again, the line is a little bit gray and blurry, but again, what's a bad day and what's a clinical disorder? Big range in between.
Yeah. Well, I find it, there are lots of things that are going through my mind right now. A couple of things. One is there's a bit of a sadness with this one, which is I've seen a lot of relationships between parents and children now go into that phase of like, you traumatized me and I've gone through this.
Boy. Well, and every parent traumatizes their kids. I mean, that's just normal.
Yeah, and I've seen like my relationship with my mom was very challenging, but the one thing I refused to call it was traumatizing, because I understood why they've actually went through a heavy trauma.
Yeah.
Somehow or the other, I had that understanding enough, or that feeling enough, going, shit, I wouldn't want to go through that, right?
And they did the best they could.
The best they could. But it took me a while to also go through that journey with them. And so for a long time, I didn't want to put that, I struggled with saying that to even them, because I'm also Indian. So that means keep everything under wraps, don't talk about it. And so, the cultural pressure is also the conditioning. I like to prefer to call it the conditioning. So I'm not traumatized. I'm more like deconditioning, if that makes sense. There's a difference to it. So when it came to defining my happiness, for example, it was, Kirti, you're supposed to get married. And I went, who said that? Because Indians would say, go have babies, grow up, get married and have children and see the world, your husband through your lens. And being in the West, I was like, no. But that was another layer to the deconditioning. And there's nothing bad to it. It just was a progression, but it was a struggle between us as well. But if I apply it today, I see a lot of blaming going on. That's one. Second of all, it's like labeling everything. When mindfulness was introduced, they said, gently label it and move on. But somehow we've labeled it and got stuck. It's like, So I'm just thinking, well, all of these modalities were introduced. Why is anxiety and loneliness just scooting upwards? What am I missing?
Well, I think part of it is this connection right? So we used to just talk to one another and go, oh my God, my parents are this, blah, blah, blah. And that served a purpose. And it served a purpose because you hear what other people say about their parents and you're like, oh, that's actually worse. Okay, never mind. Or you realize that that's normal. There is not one parent that does not have an impact on their kid. It's impossible. We are impacted by everybody. So to blame your parents for things is a bit nonsensical because it is impossible for them not to impact you. That's their goal. That's their role, right? Is to impact you in some way. And then, I think part of adulthood is just recognizing in what way did that happen? And how is it that I want to do things differently or the same or after that, your choices are yours. So I think in part, it's the less we talk to one another, the less we realize this is normal. It's supposed to be that way. And we no longer have sort of that point of comparison with our own emotional experiences. So everything seems big and tragic and huge when you look at it on its own, but when you compare it to other people's, you're like, oh, okay, actually, I can put mine with a bit of perspective here. It's not as big as it seems. And that is good for us. It helps us put things in their place. It helps us make meaning of things. It helps us sort of understand that, okay, well, my feelings are this, but relative to that, I can, do this with it. We need to be talking to one another more, but not so much that we stop listening to one another. And it's just the point of saying, I went through this. I went through that. It's almost like there's a bit of a competition almost.
Kind of,
so
yeah.
It's like, can we speak to understand and then also recognize we have lives to live?
I've often thought about what you said. And I wonder, you can talk to talk. You can talk to process, and then it's almost like you're missing the assimilation process of the talking or the listening that you get. It's like, when you eat something, you can eat it really fast. My mother would tell you that's what I did. She's like, you're always eating fast. But if I apply it to my life, you can also be listening fast.
Yeah,
you're listening.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and you're listening fast and you're just replying. So what happens is that competition. It's not that moment of, let me simmer in this, and then either I reply or I actually ask more questions because I don't get this whole thing. So there's, if I ask a younger generation if they're connecting with people, they'd be like, yeah, we're connecting and, we're doing all of this stuff. And I'm going, but then again, why is your loneliness and anxiety and all this stuff inside of you? If you're talking, what am I missing here?
Yeah, so there's something going on. The connection, the quality of the connection is not as effective as it could be because we're still not getting our needs met. So the point of connecting with people, as you rightly said, is not just to be like, hi, well, okay. It's not serving its function. And these deep connections, that's their function, is to get us to see ourselves, challenge ourselves, think about, okay, gosh, like, how do I feel about that? Or how does that resonate with me? And to kind of reflect on our own experiences. That is the point of other people. It's not just to hang out with and go shopping, although that can be fun, but people are there to challenge us and to help us grow emotionally, but only if we allow those conversations to happen and if we reflect on those conversations to happen. And I think the reflection piece is important, and I think we get less and less reflection time because the minute we have spare time, we're on the phone.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So your attention is constantly preoccupied, but you're not just kind of free thinking, kind of the type that you do when you go for a walk. And even people walking. I ride my bike every day. I watch people walking, and they're walking and looking at their phone at the same time. And I'm like, that's dangerous. But also, like,
well, I'm guilty, but I am annoying. You know what happens? I put my phone in the pocket and say, I'm going on this amazing walk and I'm not going to use my phone. But the problem that happens in that moment is my mind decides to be really blooming creative. it's like, what about this idea? What about that idea? What about this idea? And I want to document it all. So then my phone's out and I'm like, and I'm like, oh, this is not helpful at all.
Okay. But yes, we do need that free thinking time and walking, sports, being at the gym. Like, that's the point. Let your mind go and it will sort itself out and clean itself out and make sense of life.
Yeah.
But we need to give it that time. We keep feeding it with, garbage.
In yoga, they speak about cooling your senses. So one of the limbs, they call it the limbs of yoga, is practicing pratyahara. It's like withdrawing from your senses. And I find that super apt with what you're saying, because what we're doing is we're just consuming constantly. Our senses are just consuming and consuming. Want the prettier thing, want the better thing. It's just constant on consumption of information that I find when people say I'm burnt out, I'm like, I'm not surprised. You're overheated every one of your senses. But when I say that, they go, no, that's not true. And I'm like, what did I miss?
Well, it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever been to Dubai Mall on a Friday night at like 1 a.m. and you see these 6-year-old kids throwing the most spectacular tantrums. And I'm like, yeah, me too. Overtired, overstimulated. There's too much noise. It's just kids having a meltdown. And I'm like, gee, I think he just needs to go to bed. And then, oh no, we're bringing our kid to a psychologist. And I'm like, okay, there's something wrong with your kid. Just put him to bed, But yeah, again, it comes back to how are we living our lives? There's something wrong with us. We're not living well. That's all.
Well, you brought in a lot of strands. You talked about, there's something you're tapping on, which for me, I think is important, is when we talk about well-being, we ignore the social aspect or the importance of it, which is the connection you're talking about and connecting with others. I do think about, which I do want to ask you about, is when we do say that, friends also go and sit down and all of a sudden they're each other's coaches. And nothing irritates me more than going for a meal and my friend says, how are you? And I go, fine. And they go, are you sure you're just fine? I'm like, the last time I checked, yeah. Yes. And then the moment they go, so how has your week been? And I'm telling them, I'm like, well, I threw a massive tantrum, but I'm happy about this tantrum. So I'm sharing it in the Jerry Seinfeld version of it.
Okay, yeah.
Sharing it out there. And then next thing I know, they're like, you know what you should be doing? And I'm like, who asked you for advice?
Okay.
And then I'm like, oh, now what do I do? So now when the person asks me and says, do you want to meet up? I'm like, do I have the bandwidth for it? Am I going to be okay? What am I going to say? But that's also avoiding the connection, right? When everybody...
Well, and it's also thinking about what kind of connection do you want? And you're allowed to say, that works for me, that does not. And to make different decisions about who's in your life as well.
How do you have conversations in today's world not being distracted? So all your senses are blown out. You're constantly engaged. I get into a cab over here. I've never seen so much phones and gizmotics in one spot. And he's talking on the phone at the same time, trading also at the same time. It was just like a whole bunch of things going on at the same time. And we live in a world of super distractions. Then there's the whole coaching, being coached in a conversation, right? So all of this is just going on. It's just overload and overload. What are your top 3 tips here on stop getting so distracted and have a good conversation?
I think that's difficult. I mean, one is just the obvious, is put your phone away. That's it. It's not just to have a good conversation, but it's also a sign of respect to give somebody your attention. Now, it's not just about them, but it's about you too. Mm-hmm. It's hard to hear when your hand is on your phone and you're thinking about, did I get a text? You're waiting for the vibration or listening to the ting, ting, ting. Like you're not listening if you're doing that. It's hard to be focused on both. So I think that is just the biggest one. But I think the other one is just is valuing relationships. So a couple of years ago, I was not like this. I was more I'm busy. I have things to do. I prefer my own company and more focus on myself. And what I noticed is, a lot of rumination. You're constantly regurgitating your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own experiences, your own story. And the problem with that is that you never get over the story because you need something to tell yourself necessarily because you're the only one there.
Yeah.
And this is where other people are quite useful. They give you new information, new stimuli, new experiences, new things to respond to, things that are maybe more interesting than your own story. And you eventually stop and move on to something else. So other people are very useful for us. But it's also things we experience with other people we cannot on our own. And so what I mean here is, spontaneous things that you can't do it on your own. I'm thinking a couple of years ago, I'd met with a friend here in Dubai and we went out for dinner and, we were just kind of sitting and chatting and we were outside and there was a restaurant behind the row of trees behind us. Well, their music was way louder than ours. And we're like, there's like a party going on there. Mm-hmm. And so we decided, you want to go see? Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. So we crawl through the trees. We go to the other side and ta-da, there's this huge like karaoke. It was like some like horrible office party going on. Everybody's in like their suits and we're like, give me that mic. And we just joined them. Now we had the most fun. We only stayed for like 12 minutes because it was clear, we don't belong with all these accountants. But had I been alone, I would never have done it. Had I been alone, I would never have been out for dinner. Had I been alone, I would not have the courage to be like, hey, give me that mic. Let me get up on stage. It's simply having somebody else there, which changes how we think, changes our perceptions of what is possible, changes our capabilities, forces us to be outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to be ruminating about your own stuff when somebody hands you a mic and it's time for you to sing karaoke, right? Other people give us a break from ourselves. They provide us with nourishment and new stimuli, and they give us different ways to think. And so when I figured that out, and I had to do it lots, then I forced myself to do it. And I started to really appreciate this notion of social capital. If there's nobody around you, there's nobody to buy from you, there's nobody to speak on your behalf, there is no growth professionally, nothing happens without other people. So I don't care how comfortable you think you are at home, it ain't going to happen. Things happen through and with people.
You remind me of this whole conversations about introverts and extroverts.
Well, so here's an interesting one. Again, we come back to positive psychology and we, test different interventions, empirically validated interventions to help people be happier. And one of those interventions is act like an extrovert. Force yourself.
Okay.
Even if it's 10 minutes and everybody can talk for 10 minutes. Everybody can talk for 2 minutes. Everybody can talk for 42 seconds in the lift. And that's enough to give us a bit of a shift because now we've focused outside and we forget our own stories, narratives, problems, dilemmas just for long enough. That's good for us. Mm-hmm. So, certainly I've kind of made it a new philosophy in my life that, social relationships matter. It's not that I had to be best friends with everybody, but my life has dramatically improved with greater social capital.
I have a story to tell. And this is what happens, right? This is going to make you maybe blush. I don't know. Probably not. When we first spoke on the phone, the thing that really made me laugh, because I came into Dubai and I'm like, what on earth am I doing here? Let me just be honest. I was like, why did I choose this? And you said the sweetest thing that took me back to what children would do. And you were like, do you want to be my friend? And I went, oh, that's just the coolest thing. You're turning 50 and you still get to be asked, can I be your friend? That's just a cool line, you know? I think we forget to just be in that innocence of, hey, let's just hang out. Let's just try that. Second thing is, London is really different in terms of socializing and versus here. I don't know if it's a country thing or a culture thing or a weather thing, because it also can make a difference on the weather. But going Fridays in Curacao, where I'm originally from, Friday was happy hours. And happy hour meant people from coming just after work, we'd come together, enjoy a drink, have a good laugh. And it didn't matter what you were doing. It's just you just gathered, your friends gathered. And then eventually, because it was the hottest spot and everybody was there, it was like, hey, and you're just catching up. When I left and traveled the world, I missed that part. I really did. But so I substituted. I'd sit in a cafe and I'd speak to random people. I literally would go up and be like, so da-da-da-da-da, and I'd be talking to them. But I learned so much about myself through their lens by their stories. So I completely get that part of stepping out of your zone, and it changes your narrative. That 100%. And then going Friday, when you told me, okay, let's be friends and we'll meet on Friday, what I really did not expect was that you had met some of these individuals as well for the first time, but it didn't feel like that on any level. It just felt like individuals who've actually known each other for a while. And I walked out of there for the first time going, okay, Dubai is all right. It was the first time I could feel like that, because I was meeting all walks of lives. And I just thought, I don't fit here and I don't fit there. And why do I feel like
that's going to make me cry.
Why do I need to fit somewhere? Because I'm not used to this. I need to fit somewhere because I'm used to this. I got used to meeting strangers and saying, hey, what are you doing? And there's no filter. There's no like, here's my CV and here's your CV. None of that. In fact, I had to laugh because I was hungry and this guy wanted to debate with me. And I'm thinking, my stomach wants more time. And the fact that I could tell him and we had a good laugh about it, to me, that speaks volumes of humanity. That speaks humanity, is that I'm not here to one up with you. It's just like, hey, let's have a laugh. And that's what I felt on Friday. It was like the happy hour I have not experienced after a long time. So I see that value.
Good. I'm so glad. And it really makes me happy because that was kind of my hidden agenda. So you were like, I'm not sure. I'm still on the fence about Dubai. And once you meet two people you really like, you're like, okay, I want to stay. Like it comes down to people. There's no great city. There's no terrible city. It just comes down to who you meet. And we need to meet.
Yeah.
And that's the point of it. And also, it's easier than we think. And that's what I love about this act like an extrovert, because it's something everybody can do.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And you literally just start playing with people after a while, like, hey, you want to be my friend? And, you use a little bit of humor and everybody laughs. And then, but yeah, now you've made a connection. Done. Like it is that easy.
And that goes back to one of your quotes. But that goes back to one of your quotes. You said also, life is so easy if you just stop thinking so much about it. You had said that while we were talking. I was like, yeah, that's it. What you're saying here.
And again, it's just like learning how to live our lives. So you can stay home and, trying to be twisting your thoughts and trying to get, through feeling depressed or anxious or blah, blah, blah. Or you could just walk up to somebody in an elevator and be like, hi, I love your shoes. Where did you get those? Whoa, cool. And then the door opens and they leave. And that was 6 seconds. That's it. That little tiny shift will buy you a couple of minutes of respite from yourself.
Yeah.
And if we extend that over time, the more stories you hear, the more people you connect with, suddenly you don't even remember what you weren't feeling so great about, because now you're living your life, you're connecting, you're doing things, you're out, you're learning, you're being exposed, you're living.
It's absolutely so. A friend of mine told me once, never ask me how I am, ask me what my day was like.
I like that. That's a great question. Yeah.
And he stopped me. He goes, because when I tell you how I am, I'll tell you good and we'll cut the conversation. But if you ask me what my day was like, now we're going to have a conversation. And to me, that always stuck with me. So now I try to my left. I do not ask you how your day is. It's like, what was your day like? Because I want to know more rather than let's tick this box and we look all cute and happy. It just doesn't make sense anymore.
And I find there's this weird thing. We're all like, oh, I don't want to ask too many questions, or I don't want to offend people. I don't want to appear nosy. People are dying to be asked how their day was. People like to talk about themselves. Ask them. And again, we have all these rules for ourselves. Oh, stranger, can't talk to you. Okay, that's fine when you're 5 years old, but we're adults now. Like, you can tell if somebody's creepy, and if they're creepy, you just be like, I just got a phone call. I need to go. Do what everybody else does. Like, it's not a big deal. And of course, it doesn't work on everybody, but most people want to talk to you.
Oh, well, I get
and you are more interesting than you think you are.
Yeah. I learned that because I should confess, well, maybe it's a confession I make on this podcast, but I was suicidal. I was running a yoga center in Curacao, and I was working with some severe cases, and I had become very suicidal, and it was very silent about it. And I knew that if I did not leave, I was just going to do it. So I ended up traveling the world. I took the expensive way out. And I was
okay.
But along the way, I wanted to hide. I didn't want anyone to know about me. So I'd be like in the corner of the corners of corners. Because in Curacao, I had no space. Everybody was constantly in my, I want to speak to Kirti mode. But it was always about chewing my head for their lives. So it was I always felt one-way street. Anyway. So now what happens is I still get people coming up to me. And I have a good joy with it because it's different. So I had yesterday, somebody came up to me at the hotel here, and she was like, were you on a panel talking about this in this book in India? And I'm looking at her and I'm like, so I said to her, thank you for the compliment. I wish I was on a panel talking about a book. I haven't reached her yet, but can you tell me how to get there? And she was like super embarrassed. I said, don't get embarrassed. I feel very flattered, but tell me more about you. We ended up having a 15-minute conversation, and she opened up and telling me her whole world. And I just thought, and she just felt really good about herself afterwards. And I just think, that's it. And other people come up and they go, I love your lipstick. I'm like, do you want it? And then I'll go in a complete conversation about it. But I would have never had that confidence. It's like act like an extrovert. I'd have never had that confidence if it hadn't been for strangers. And I think we underestimate, somehow or the other, also we treat strangers like with so much mistrust.
Unwarranted mistrust.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always tell people, when I was teaching at university, my students would be like, yeah, but miss, you don't know who you're dealing with. And I said, yeah, you're dealing with me. And this look of confusion, but it's like, but who's a stranger? Is this somebody you don't know? I was a stranger to you. And like, we're now talking about this, like everybody in your life has been a stranger and nobody's killed you yet. Right? Like, yeah, no, it's unwarranted. It's misplaced. And again, we all know when somebody's a bit creepy or strange, then don't talk to them. But there's 99 other people to talk to. So we kind of throw away, for the sake of that one person, we chuck everybody out, and it's very exaggerated, and it's pointless, and it harms us in the end.
That comes to the one thing we haven't talked about yet. Well, it goes with well-being. You said something till today. Well-being is spoken like it's ill-being. From the lens of ill-being. Tied in with when I scroll online, there is so much fear. Like, this is a problem and this is a problem. We're selling to each other some solution. But there's like, you're bombarded with constant problem. And that's that narrative of ill-being I was thinking about.
Yeah.
And I become very aware of it since I heard that from you. Can you explain that? Because I don't...
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same as, bad news sells. You can't have a whole news show with good news. I mean, that's boring. Saved a cat in a tree. I mean, you know, so, and ill-being is the same. It's almost like this is the way we connect with one another. I can hook you with ill-being because everybody's got something. So the chances are good something is going to appeal to you, but then it becomes our way of connecting with one another, or it becomes our way of showing up. Hi, I have anxiety. Hi, I have, okay, well, okay. It kind of limits doors right away.
Yeah.
But also it makes people kind of stop the conversation, but also stop their own development. And so if I see my identity as this is what I have, my whole identity becomes about that versus, yeah, okay, I get anxious when this happens or that happens, but this is the rest of my life. And this is how I'm living it and doing other things, right? So it's a limiting narrative. It doesn't mean it's made up, but it has limitations and it stops us in our growth. And yeah, I mean, ill-being is also kind of trendy now. I think we're all, you know, we all have a label of sorts. And if you don't have one, it's kind of like.
I feel like that about menopause right now. Everybody wants to talk. They're like, do a workshop on it. I was like, I've done one. I'm done and I'm over it, because you're making my menopause feel like illness, but it's part of life. I mean, get over it. I'm moody, but I love my moodiness right now. I'm like, my happiness right there.
Yeah, it's like we don't need to make a thing out of everything. Yeah. Because, you know, and there's lots of research on, you know, more around the physical stuff, but I'm starting to see it with the psychological stuff as well. The more attention you give something, actually, the bigger it becomes. Just like when you have a headache. If you could just be like, okay, whatever, I'm just going to get on with it and ignore it for a little bit and get on with my day. It will just go away and you won't notice it. Or you could sit on the couch and go, oh God, I really have a headache. It will get worse because you're focusing on it now. You are magnifying it on your own. So sometimes giving something attention actually makes things worse. Now, I'm not saying overlook everything, because it's possible you may be having a heart attack and we don't want to dismiss that. But, you know, we also, again, we need to live our lives. And if we stop at every bad day, every symptom, every this, every that, every insult, every injury, every offense, wow, this becomes a harder life than maybe what could ever have been. And sometimes we need to learn the art of just saying, whatever, I'm moving on and I'm just going to live my life here.
For me, I think about it as checking in. I wrote that in my, one of the slogans in my book was check in. And when you check in, it's not to amplify, but to check in to see how deep and true natured is the pain, you know? Because I agree with you. If we keep going on, it's like that itch, you know, when you get a mosquito bite and you're just itching and it's like a forever itch. It doesn't stop.
Well, and also you start tearing the skin, and now it's bigger than the mosquito bite is now. Exactly. Actually. Yeah.
And then you don't want to itch it, but then you're you're like, I just need to itch it a little bit, you know, and you're in that phase. That's that checking in point is where I'm like, you know, and, but I think that is absolutely true, is that we amplify it and we're amplifying ill-being. But how do you,
And maybe your question was, how do we get over that? And it's to have compelling lives.
What do you mean by compelling lives, though?
So, you know, if we think about burnout at work, there's lots of literature on burnout, et cetera. And 2-3 years ago, it was a really great study and basically said, if you want to not burn out, basically just get a better life. What that means is when you have a great life, it's a compelling life, and you have goals and you have things outside of work, you have a reason to leave at 5. You have a reason to care a little less about what happens at work because you are now training for a triathlon and you got to be at training at 6:00 and you're meeting great people. And tonight you're going to do X amount of kilometers and you're going to focus on your nutrition and your this. You have a counterbalance to work. But most of us don't do that. We have a very stressful job. We hold our breath. So 5, 6, 7, whatever time you go home, we hold our breath. We lay on the couch, watch Netflix, eat, and we go to sleep, and we carry on the next day. Exhale. And by the time Friday rolls around, we've got no oxygen left. We're totally exhausted, and we're just consumed by work as an example of a stressor. But if we're able to cut that with, I get my time after work. Now, maybe it's only 45 minutes. Sometimes it's all we get. Sometimes we only get 30 minutes. But this is where it comes down to, are you living your life well? So if you only have 30 minutes every day, great. Are you taking that 30 minutes to watch Netflix? That's not filling. That's not energizing. That's not doing it. This is not a compelling life, no matter how dramatic and amazing the series are, because I'm watching like Scandi, all these crime series. Anyway, I love them, but that's not the point.
I'm watching Blacklist.
Okay. But we need things that elevate us and nourish us and give us energy. I have a friend, I just met with her 2 weeks ago. She does choir practice. And I'm like, who does choir practice other than old ladies? She's like, but I love it. So she drives, I think she's moved to Iraq or any one of these places. She drives all the way into Dubai once a week to meet with her ladies, and they sing.
No way. How cool is that?
And it's a long day, but she says, you know what? The energy and the uplift I get from that, like, this is the highlight of my week. Anything else after that, whatever, it's work. And so if you don't have a counterbalance, if you don't have a compelling life, everything gets to you. Everything bothers you. Everything drains you. Everything exhausts you. Everything becomes this magnificent, huge thing in your life because that's all there is.
Yeah.
And if we're just living our lives on Saturday afternoon, this is not a life either.
I agree with that. I saw it. I had it happen to me, so I totally understand the repercussions.
And I get work is important and we want to pour our soul into it. And look, if it's fulfilling you, go for it. I'll never tell people stop at a certain time. But you also know when it's no longer fulfilling you and is just draining you.
But what I do agree with you, you said this earlier in the conversation, it's about changing systems also. Because I think systems are not helping the freedom to access and find the balance between the two to some degree.
Correct. Absolutely. And this is why, I'm also interested in, quality of life and urban planning and how cities can help us have a good life or not.
Oh, yeah.
So this is also part of the issue. You work until 6. Now you should have about 3 or 4 hours there before you go to bed. But if you're stuck in traffic for 2 of those hours, and then you go home and eat, and now it's another 45 minutes back to your gym, this is not helpful.
But in those 2 hours, you're still consuming work.
Or you're consuming nothing and just getting pissed off and drained because actually it's nothing. It's dead time. It's even worse than work. You're literally watching the minutes go by and saying, this is like 2 hours of my life I will never get back. So sometimes it is worth thinking about, do I live someplace more expensive, but I'm closer to work so I can save time? Time is really wealth today because you can have a lot of money, but if you don't have time, it's pointless. And so how do we buy time? How do we get time? How do we organize our lives a little bit differently so that we can get more time? But most of us, if we do get time, then we waste it.
Yeah, we're not maximizing the joy of the time, actually.
We're not. There's work and non-work.
Well, you're maximizing time from either with work, procrastination, instead of filling it with what could actually give you energy. Because when I do joyful things, I'm on a high. I walked out on Friday exhausted, but happy exhausted. It was like, that's a nice energy just spent,
Nice.
But it's that kind of quality of energy spent in terms of time. Whereas procrastination, if you're in front of Netflix because you're so exhausted, you can't be bothered to do anything. I'm hardly ever present in those moments with even what's going on. It's like background noise.
And you're not replenishing, you're not getting energy, you're literally just holding your breath and mentally just waiting till the next day.
Yeah.
There's nothing going on there that you may as well be stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
because you're also not doing anything, right? Yeah. So again, it comes down to, how do we live our lives? Like, we have approximately 4,000 Mondays. How are we going to do that?
Well, it sounds to me like happiness, it's not when people tell me happiness is what you make of it, I'm like, okay, stop. But it's actually,
sometimes your hands are tied, right? If you're stuck in traffic for 2 hours, that is going to drain your happiness. And just even forget the word happiness. Like, that's the outcome. It's how do I want to live my time to maximize its value. That's also not catchy. I need to work on a catchier title.
Well, for me, what I've come to understand from this conversation is that you actually want to sit down and say, okay, my path to, I feel happiness. All right. So like I feel sadness. And in order to feel that, what is the value of that? So is it the value of family time? Is it my value with creativity? Like I like to doodle, but when I doodle, I actually feel at peace. That for me is like, give me 30 minutes to not, just go and be a doodler. I'm happy doodling away because I use the word even I'm happy doodling. So you can sit down and assess what fills your cup, but it's the quality of what fills your cup that makes it. And if you keep filling it with work or procrastination, well, you're not really filling the value. So yeah, hurry up, work on a better tagline.
Yeah, I need to.
On with it.
Exactly. And it's just kind of thinking about, I think sometimes we either oversimplify or overcomplicate happiness. And people will often do what's one thing you could do? So I think that if you want just one thing, it's think of times in your life where you've been happier and just do more of that.
Until you find it. I've heard that before as well. But
it already works. You've done it. And you're capable of doing it because you've done it.
I don't think my sisters want to hear it because my version of happy is to trouble them and argue with them.
Well, then they don't want to hear that. Yeah.
No, they're like, yeah, no. But I love it because it brings out the best in them. They just don't know it. But okay, last one.
Sure.
The wonderful conversation of how do you think you're connecting online? I heard that conversation of we connect on VR and AR online. To me, the fact that I have the ability to control when I want to check out through a tech, for me, is like I'm avoiding something. This is my perception. Does it make sense? So I have a little avatar that looks like Kirti, or whatever Kirti wants to look like, the cool Adidas and whatever's. And you come in and you want to be whatever you want to be, and we're dialoguing. But to me, that's not real connection. Why is it that I don't feel like that's real connection? Because the generations, have you ever done study where it says how they actually think that is connecting? What am I missing?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think it is connection of sorts. It's a safe connection. There's a boundary. You don't actually have to meet. And, sometimes in these virtual connections, it's less risky. So there's no risk of being judged. There's no risk of somebody going, woo, and walking out. And although these are hurtful experiences, we also need them for our growth.
Yeah, thank you.
So yes, it is a connection of sorts. No one can deny that. And I think, young people would say that. But is it, again, if we think about what nourishes us, that would be the equivalent of hedonic happiness. It's a quick boost. We connect. It's a joke. It's a laugh. We get this crazy tech experience. Okay. And then do you walk away and, contemplate? And was it enough of an experience to shift your perspective or to think about, well, how do I feel about that? Did it challenge you in some way to be a better person or to hear negative feedback and to maybe make changes in how you approach people, how you think about things. And that's where I feel it's kind of the equivalent of eating junk food. It'll fill you up when you're starving. Yeah, okay, give me some calories. Some are better than nothing, but you're not getting your fruits and your vegetables and your this and your that, right? So this is my fear with this technology is people kind of, I don't want to say confused because it sounds very insulting, but I think maybe people are choosing fast calories and maybe not the longer term, what is good for your development and your emotional growth and your self-actualization.
Well, what also scares me, building on that, is when we start blurring the facts from the reality. You can create this complete sub-reality version of you online. And then when you'll actually meet in person, you're expecting that version of each other. And it's not. And what are the implications of that in itself, you know? So, yeah.
I feel like that's a whole other podcast.
That is. But having said that, there is hope. There is hope. Did you know what I came across something very cute, sweet, that in Dubai, the way singles connect and have great relationships is through paddle the game. And
okay.
I thought, oh, that's cool. I was like, damn it, where was it when I needed that? But it was that's a different story.
Yeah, I feel Dubai is good for that we still have a lot of the human interaction. There's lots of events. People want to go out. People want to be seen, maybe for the, different reasons, but people do connect here.
My friend said it very apt. I had lunch with her on Saturday. She goes, Kirti, tell me, how many people have you met more people in 1 week in Dubai than you've met a lifetime in UK? I thought back and I was like, yeah, that's actually pretty true. And she goes, you see, I told you. And I was like, all right, for the next one.
That's a great question because people come here for that.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
What's the one thing you wish everybody would know that would make all the difference? To become friends with their minds about this one thing.
Stop thinking of yourself so much. I think we've become like the main actors in our lives, and we take ourselves terribly seriously, and we're almost like a bit of narcissists in our own world. It's not all about you. Even in your own life, it's not all about you. Connect with other people, and it brings us back down to size, and it puts things in perspective, and it puts things in place, and it makes life easier to live because you're not getting in your own way all the time.
Better leave it with that. I'm so appreciative you came on today. I'm happy.
My pleasure.
You broke my whole love-hate relationship with the word happiness. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you so much.
All right. So what did you think about happiness? What were you surprised about? For me, the first time I spoke to her, it was about how she said we were coming from a space of ill-being when talking about our well-being. I thought that was so interesting. And the second thing I really thought was spot on to me was that we're looking too deep and thinking that everything is such a problem. We're over-identifying it, that we actually don't step back and ask ourselves, how do we want to live our lives? For me, I think that's a very important question to ask ourselves on a monthly basis or ever so often basis, and check in within ourselves so that we know what we are choosing for. But that was my takeaway. I'd love to hear what your takeaway is. Do leave it in the comments. And if you liked this week's episode, do share it out with somebody. Or better yet, can you give us a review? Because that does help us get this podcast out there. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Till the next one, take care.